The glittering crystalline dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled with the light of 1,000 distant stars. Inside, representatives of over 300 species gathered in concentric rings, their voices a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and modulated tones as translation devices struggled to keep pace with the chaotic debate. Emergency session protocols had been invoked, something that hadn't happened in over 70 standard cycles. Ambassador Talon of the Ani species stood at the central podium, his feathered wings trembling. The typically proud avian diplomat's plumage was disheveled, and his voice cracked as he addressed the assembly. His translator unit struggled to convert his distressed warbles into coherent speech. The Korak Empire has positioned their annihilation fleet at the edge of our home system. Talon's voice echoed through the chamber. Their emperor has issued an ultimatum: unconditional surrender within 48 standard hours, or they will commence orbital bombardment of all 17 Ani colonies. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of horrified exclamations. The Korak Empire had been expanding aggressively for decades, but this was unprecedented, even for them. Complete annihilation of a founding council species would shatter the tenuous peace that had held the galactic community together. High Counselor Vex, a gaseous entity contained within an elaborate environmental suit, floated forward. What of the Defense Pact? Surely the combined forces of the Allied systems can mount a response. Talon's feathers flattened in despair. Our intelligence reports indicate the Korak have assembled over 300 warships, including 7 planet killers. The Allied fleets are scattered across 3 sectors, dealing with border skirmishes, likely diversionary tactics. By the time they could regroup, my people will be ash. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing the massive Korak armada positioned at the edge of the Ani home system. The ships resembled predatory sea creatures from some nightmare ocean, all sharp angles and protruding weapon arrays. The Korak Empire believes our unwillingness to develop weapons of mass destruction makes us weak. Talon continued. They see our dedication to peaceful scientific advancement as an invitation to conquest. A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the assembly. The Galactic Council had long promoted peaceful coexistence, with member species dedicating their resources to scientific advancement rather than warfare. But the Korak had never joined the Council, had never signed the non-aggression pacts. They operated on a simple philosophy: the strong survive, the weak perish. "What do you propose, Ambassador?" asked Vex, though the tone of their modulated voice suggested they already knew the answer. Talon's wings spread slightly, a gesture of desperate determination. "We must contact the humans." The chamber fell silent, then erupted into chaos. "Madness! The Deathworlders? We would invite doom upon ourselves." Counselor Maris of the Thelicosan Federation rose from her water tank, her tentacles gesturing emphatically. "The humans have isolated themselves within their territory for a reason. Their history of warfare makes them unpredictable. They are barely civilized." "They are our only hope," Talon insisted. "The Korak understand only strength. The humans have it in abundance." "You would invite predators into your nest to scare away scavengers," hissed Delegate Cyril, his reptilian features contorted in disapproval. "Have you forgotten what happened in the Orion conflict? Human warships reduced 3 planets to molten rock." "Those planets were uninhabited military installations," Talon countered, "and they were responding to a direct attack on their colonies. The humans have demonstrated restraint when dealing with civilian populations." High Counselor Vex's environmental suit pulsed with bands of cautionary yellow light. "The humans are unpredictable. Their classification as Deathworlders is not merely about their physical capabilities. Their psychology is forged in constant struggle. They do not think like we do." Talon activated another holographic display. "I have compiled data on human response patterns to distress signals. In 97% of documented cases, humans will render aid to species in danger, even at great personal risk. It is hardwired into their neural pathways, a peculiar evolutionary trait for predators. The data scrolled through the air, incident after incident, where human vessels had diverted course, sometimes traveling for weeks, to respond to distress signals from alien ships. Records of human emergency personnel rushing into collapsing structures to save individuals they had never met. Accounts of human diplomats negotiating peace between warring factions at the risk of their own lives. "The Korak will annihilate my people in 48 hours, Talon said, his voice steadying with resolve. "I formally request permission to broadcast an emergency signal to human space." High Counselor Vex's suit shifted to a deep blue, indicating deep contemplation. "The Council will deliberate, but understand, Ambassador Talon, if we approve this request, we cannot control what follows. The humans decide their level of involvement, and if they choose to engage, the Galactic Council will not be responsible for the consequences." Talon's feathers lifted slightly, in what his species recognized as grim determination. When facing extinction, consequences become a luxury my people cannot afford. The Council's deliberation took 7 precious hours. In the end, with the Annie homeworld's time running critically short, they granted Talon's request with a single condition. The distress signal would be sent, but it would be coded to avoid any implication that the Galactic Council itself was requesting intervention. This was to be understood as a plea from one species to another, not an official diplomatic request. As the signal was transmitted toward the edge of human space, Talon felt the weight of his entire species' future resting on his wings. The humans were unpredictable, yes, but in that unpredictability lay the Ani's only hope. The signal raced across the void, carrying with it the desperate plea of a peaceful people facing annihilation. Captain Marcus Reed stood on the observation deck of the UES Prometheus, gazing at the vast starfield beyond the reinforced viewport. The massive destroyer, one of humanity's most advanced warships, hung in space at the very edge of Earth Federation territory, a silent sentinel guarding the border of human space. Reed was a tall man with close-cropped dark hair, streaked with premature gray at the temples, the result of 15 years commanding vessels on the frontier. His weathered face bore the subtle signs of someone who had spent much of his life under artificial gravity and recycled air. Yet despite this, he carried himself with the straight-backed posture of a career military officer, hands clasped behind his back as he contemplated the void. "Captain," came a voice from behind him. Commander Stone, his executive officer, approached with a data tablet in hand. She was shorter than Reed, with an efficient demeanor and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We've received a transmission you should see." Reed turned, one eyebrow raised. "From command?" "No, sir. It's—" Stone hesitated, which was unusual for her. "It's a distress signal, non-human origin." Reed took the tablet, scanning the decoded message. His expression remained carefully neutral, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. "Ani homeworld. 48-hour ultimatum from the Korak Empire. Civilian population of 17 billion at risk." He handed the tablet back to Stone. "What's command's response?" "That's just it, sir. The signal wasn't sent to command. It was directed specifically to any human vessels in this sector." Stone's eyes met his. "We're the only ship within range to respond within the time frame." Reed turned back to the viewport, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of stars. "The non-interference directive is clear. Commander, human forces are not to involve themselves in conflicts between alien powers unless Earth Federation interests are directly threatened." "Yes, sir." Neither spoke for a long moment. They both knew the history. Humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage had been met with fear and suspicion. Humans were classified as Deathworlders, evolved on a planet with higher gravity, denser atmosphere, and more lethal flora and fauna than most sentient species encountered. Their bodies were built to endure punishment that would kill most aliens. And their history was stained with warfare on a scale that horrified the peaceful species of the Galactic Council. The isolation of human territory had been a mutual agreement. The galaxy feared humans, and humans had little interest in joining a political body that viewed them as barely restrained savages. The Ani are a founding species of the Galactic Council, Stone said carefully. Peaceful, advanced medical technology. They've never developed weapons of mass destruction. I'm aware of their file, Reed replied. The Korak Empire has a policy of total subjugation, if the threat is genuine. I know what the Korak do to conquered worlds. Commander. Reed's voice was sharp. He took a breath, steadying himself. Plot a course to the Ani system. Maximum sustainable speed. Alert the crew we'll be conducting a recon mission to assess the situation. Stone's expression remained professional, but Reed caught the slight approval in her eyes. Yes, sir. And if we confirm the Korak threat? Reed's gaze hardened as he looked back toward the stars. Then, we'll do what humans have always done when innocents are threatened by tyrants. We'll make the tyrants regret their choices. As Stone left to carry out his orders, Reed remained on the observation deck. The non-interference directive existed for good reasons. Humanity's capacity for violence had frightened the galaxy once before. But there was another human trait the galaxy often overlooked, when innocents cried out for help. Something deep in human DNA responded. The Prometheus broke orbit, its massive engines flaring to life as it accelerated toward the jump point. Reed knew he was potentially risking his career, possibly even court-martial. But some principles transcended regulations. If 17 billion Ani were truly facing extinction, how could he live with himself if he turned away? As the ship prepared for its jump to faster-than-light travel, Reed recalled an old Earth saying that had become something of an unofficial motto among human space captains. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. The Prometheus disappeared into the quantum fold, leaving only a brief flash of energy to mark its passage. In the Ani home system, the massive Korak fleet hung in space like a gathering storm. 300 warships arranged in a precise formation that would allow them to begin systematic planetary bombardment the moment the Emperor gave the command. The ships were biomechanical marvels, their hulls resembling the chitinous exoskeletons of massive insects, weapon arrays protruding like venomous stingers. On the bridge of the flagship Inevitable Dominance, Admiral Kresh watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Standing over 2 meters tall, with gray-green scaled skin and multiple rows of bony ridges, where most species would have hair, Kresh was an imposing figure even among the militaristic Korak. The Ani have increased their communications with the Galactic Council, reported his communications officer. They appear to be pleading for intervention. Kresh made a dismissive gesture with one clawed hand. The Council has no military force capable of challenging this fleet. Their response will be limited to diplomatic protests, which Emperor Vra has already deemed irrelevant. Sir, the censor officer interrupted. We've detected an unusual energy signature at the edge of the system. It appears something has emerged from faster-than-light travel. Kresh turned toward the main view screen. Identification? Unknown, Admiral. It doesn't match any known Galactic Council vessel. The energy signature is unusual. Kresh's ridges flared with irritation. Show me! The view screen shifted to show a distant point of light. Magnification increased until the ship came into focus, sleek and predatory, with none of the ornate aesthetics common to Council vessels. Its hull was a dark, matte gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Enhance further, Kresh ordered, a note of concern entering his voice. As the image clarified, the blood drained from the Admiral's face. On the side of the vessel, clear even at this distance, was an emblem he recognized immediately. A stylized Earth, surrounded by stars. Human, he hissed, the word carrying a weight of dread that silenced the bridge crew. "Sir," the tactical officer said, his voice unsteady. "The vessel appears to be a Prometheus-class destroyer. Human military. Heavily armed." Kresh stared at the image, his mind racing. The humans had never involved themselves in Korak expansion before. Their territory was far from Korak influence, and they had shown no interest in galactic politics for decades. "It's only one ship," he said finally, more to reassure himself than his crew. "Our fleet numbers 300. Even the Deathworlders cannot hope to challenge such odds." But as he spoke, a cold knot of dread formed in his stomach. The humans were unpredictable, dangerous. There were stories, unconfirmed reports of what had happened to the last force that had directly engaged human warships. "Maintain position," he ordered. "Alert Emperor Vra of this development, and watch that ship carefully. If it makes any aggressive move, I want to know immediately." As his officers hurried to comply, Kresh couldn't shake the feeling that the carefully planned subjugation of the Ani had just become infinitely more complicated. Aboard the Prometheus, Captain Reed studied the tactical display with a grim expression. The Korak fleet was massive, far larger than intelligence reports had suggested. The Ani hadn't exaggerated the threat. 300 ships, including 7 dreadnoughts classified as planet killers, reported Commander Stone. "Arranged in bombardment formation. They're serious, Captain." Reed nodded slowly. "And our stealth systems? Functioning at optimal capacity. They know we're here, but our position appears as a single ship conducting observation. The scout vessels remain undetected. When the Prometheus had entered the system, it had deployed 3 small scout ships, vessels so thoroughly stealthed they were virtually undetectable. These scouts had spread out through the system, gathering detailed intelligence on the Korak fleet, ship capabilities, command structure, weak points. What about communications with the Ani homeworld? Lieutenant Commander Ishida, the communications officer, looked up from her station. "Established and secure, Captain. They're not believing what they're seeing. A human warship in their system." "Patch me through to their defense command," Reed ordered. A moment later, the view screen flickered to show an Ani official. The avian being's feathers were puffed in what Reed recognized as extreme stress, the translator unit at its throat glowing as it processed the alien speech. "This is Captain Marcus Reed of the Earth Federation ship Prometheus," Reed began, keeping his voice steady and authoritative. "We received your distress signal and have come to assess the situation." The Ani's feathers rippled in what might have been disbelief. "Captain Reed, I am Defense Coordinator Marin. We had hoped for aid, but did not truly expect a response. You must understand, the Korak fleet outnumbers you 300 to 1. While we are profoundly grateful for your presence, I fear you may have placed yourself in grave danger for no purpose." Reed allowed himself a small smile. "Let me worry about the odds. Coordinator, what's the status of your civilian population?" "Emergency shelters are prepared, but they would offer minimal protection against orbital bombardment. We have begun evacuations to our deepest underground facilities, but we cannot possibly move 17 billion citizens in the time remaining." "Understood. Stand by for further communication." Reed turned to his tactical officer, Sergeant Miller, a stocky woman with calculating eyes who had served with him for 7 years. "What's our assessment of Korak capabilities?" Miller gestured to the tactical display. "Their numbers are overwhelming, but their technology is several generations behind ours. Thick armor, powerful weapons, but relatively poor maneuverability and targeting systems. Their advantage lies in brute force rather than sophistication." Reed nodded. "And their command structure? Hierarchical and rigid. All orders flow from the flagship, the inevitable dominance." Miller highlighted a massive vessel at the center of the Korak formation. "Admiral Kresh commands the fleet, but Emperor Vra himself is present on the flagship. Our intelligence suggests the Korak operate on strict protocols. Initiative is not encouraged among lower ranks. A critical weakness, Reed mused. He studied the display for a long moment, then turned to address his bridge crew. What I'm about to propose goes well beyond our orders. Any officer who wishes to register an objection may do so now, and it will be noted in my log without prejudice. The bridge remained silent. Reed nodded, a surge of pride warming his chest. Very well. Here's what we're going to do. For the next hour, Reed outlined a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. The scout vessels would continue gathering intelligence, focusing on identifying key vulnerabilities in the Korak command structure. Meanwhile, the Prometheus would make a series of calculated maneuvers, giving the impression of a ship conducting routine observation while gradually moving into position for what would come next. Sir, Commander Stone said when he had finished, this plan relies on a significant amount of improvisation. Reed's expression was grim, but determined. Humanity's greatest military advantage has always been our adaptability. Commander, the Korak expect us to behave according to logical protocols, to recognize our numerical disadvantage and retreat. They don't understand that humans have never been particularly impressed by bad odds. As the crew dispersed to their stations to prepare, Reed opened a secure channel to Earth Fleet Command. His message was brief and to the point. He had encountered a situation that compelled humanitarian intervention under Statute 7A of the Earth Federation Charter. The Prometheus would engage in defensive operations to protect the civilian population from imminent genocide. He requested any available support, but acknowledged he was acting on his own authority. Reed knew the message would take hours to reach Earth, and any response would be equally delayed. By then, the situation would be resolved one way or another. As the Prometheus moved into position, Reed found himself thinking about the long history of human warfare. For all the galaxy's fear of humanity's capacity for violence, few aliens truly understood that same capacity had been forged in the defense of the defenseless, in standing against tyrants and bullies. The Korak were about to learn a lesson that countless human tyrants had learned throughout history. There was nothing more dangerous than a human fighting for a righteous cause. On the Annie homeworld, Ambassador Talon watched the skies with a mixture of dread and fragile hope. The single human vessel that had answered their plea seemed impossibly small against the might of the Korak Armada. Yet the humans had not retreated. They remained, a silent guardian standing between extinction and survival. Talon had studied human history extensively during his diplomatic career. Their capacity for both destruction and compassion had fascinated him. Many in the Galactic Council feared humans as barely restrained savages. But Talon had seen something else in the historical records. Humans would fight with unmatched ferocity. Yes, but most often when defending others. They call their ship Prometheus, he told the gathered Annie officials. In human mythology, Prometheus was a being who stole fire from the gods to give to those who had none, and suffered eternal punishment for his compassion. One of the officials rustled his wings nervously. A fitting name if these humans bring destruction upon themselves for our sake. But what can one ship do against 300? Talon's gaze returned to the skies. That, I believe, is what we are about to discover. Aboard the Prometheus, Captain Reed gave the order that would commit them irrevocably to action. Initiate Operation Thunderclap. Throughout the ship, crew members moved with practiced efficiency. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Patel oversaw the reconfiguration of the ship's power distribution, diverting additional energy to the shields and weapon systems. In the tactical center, Sergeant Miller coordinated with the deployed scout vessels, synchronizing their movements with the main assault plan. On the bridge, Reed watched as the countdown timer reached 0. Execute! The Prometheus suddenly accelerated, its engines flaring with blinding intensity as it surged directly toward the heart of the Korak fleet. Simultaneously, The 3 scout vessels decloaked at strategic points throughout the enemy formation. They're small, but powerful weapon systems targeting communications arrays and sensor nodes on multiple Karak vessels. The effect was immediate and devastating. Confusion rippled through the Karak fleet as ships lost contact with command. Sensors went dark, and targeting systems failed. The rigid command structure that Admiral Kresh relied upon began to fracture as individual ship captains, unable to receive orders, were forced to make decisions they were neither trained nor authorized to make. Through this chaos, the Prometheus drove like a spear, its advanced point defense systems intercepting enemy fire, while its main weapons targeted the propulsion systems of key vessels. Reed had no intention of destroying ships if he could avoid it. His target was mobility and coordination. "Status of the flagship?" Reed demanded. "Still protected behind 3 layers of support vessels," Stone reported. "But the formation is breaking down. We've disabled the engines on 17 ships and compromised communications on at least 40 more." Reed nodded. "Execute Phase 2. The Prometheus abruptly changed course, diving beneath a Karak heavy cruiser and emerging on the other side, weapons blazing. 3 more enemy vessels lost engine power, drifting helplessly as the human warship continued its relentless advance toward the flagship. On the inevitable dominance, Admiral Kresh watched in growing horror as his carefully organized fleet dissolved into chaos. The humans weren't fighting as expected. They weren't trying to destroy his ships outright, but were instead systematically dismantling his command and control capabilities. "Get me targeting solutions on that human vessel," he roared. "Impossible, Admiral," his tactical officer responded, panic evident in his voice. "They're moving too erratically, and our targeting systems are being jammed." Emperor Vra, who had been observing from a throne-like command chair at the rear of the bridge, rose to his full height. The Korak ruler was even more imposing than Kresh. His scales darker, and the bony ridges on his head formed into what resembled a natural crown. "This is unacceptable," Vra hissed. "One ship cannot defy the might of the Korak Empire. Order all vessels to concentrate fire on the human ship. I don't care if they have to target manually." "Emperor," Kresh began, "our formation is already compromised," Vra cut him off. "Destroy that ship, Admiral, or I will find someone who can—" Kresh turned back to the tactical display, issuing new orders. Throughout the fleet, Korak vessels began to break formation, turning their massive weapon arrays toward the darting, weaving Prometheus. It was exactly what Captain Reed had anticipated. "They're taking the bait," Stone reported. "Enemy vessels breaking formation to pursue us." Reed allowed himself a tight smile. "Bring us about. Target the gap that's opened in their defensive screen. All weapons. Maximum yield." The Prometheus pivoted with impossible grace for a vessel of its size, its main weapons coming to bear on the now exposed flank of a Korak dreadnought. The energy beams that lanced out were unlike anything the Korak had encountered before, not the expected plasma-based weapons, but something far more advanced. Where they struck, the dreadnought's hull simply ceased to exist. Molecular bonds severed at a quantum level. Before the Karak could react, the Prometheus had slipped through the gap in their formation, now inside their defensive perimeter and on a direct course for the flagship. Reed's plan had never been to defeat 300 ships in direct combat. That would have been impossible even for a vessel as advanced as the Prometheus. Instead, he was executing a strategy as old as human warfare. Target the command structure, create confusion, then strike at the heart. "Sir," Commander Stone's voice cut through Reed's concentration. "New contacts emerging from Quantum Fold. 3 signatures. Earth Federation IFF codes." Reed's head snapped up. "Identify!" Stone's expression shifted from surprise to fierce joy. "UES Intrepid, UES Dauntless, and UES Resolute. Captain, they're Valkyrie-class destroyers." A ragged cheer went up from the bridge crew. The Valkyrie-class were the newest, most advanced warships in the Earth fleet, even more powerful than the Prometheus. A communication channel opened, and the view screen showed the stern face of Admiral Jessica Brooks. "Captain Reed, it appears you've started the party without us." Reed couldn't suppress his relief. "Admiral, your timing is impeccable. Your message to Fleet Command was quite compelling. General Hayes authorized immediate deployment of available assets to your position." Brooks' expression hardened. "The Korak Empire's planned genocide violates multiple provisions of interstellar law. We are authorized to take all necessary measures to prevent it." As they spoke, the 3 Valkyrie-class destroyers moved into attack formation, their weapon systems coming online. Unlike the Prometheus, which had been fighting a guerrilla action, the new arrivals made no attempt at subtlety. They surged forward, weapons blazing, tearing through the disorganized Korak fleet like predators among prey. "Admiral Brooks has tactical command," Reed informed his crew. "We'll continue with our primary objective, neutralizing the flagship." With the Korak fleet now divided between multiple threats, the Prometheus found its path to the inevitable dominance suddenly clearer. Reed ordered maximum thrust, and the ship shot forward, closing the distance rapidly. "Prepare boarding parties," he ordered. "Tactical teams only. Our objective is Emperor Vra and Admiral Kresh." Commander Stone looked at him sharply. "Captain, that's a violation of about 16 regulations." Reed finished for her. "Noted, Commander. But this ends today, and it ends with the Korak leadership understanding the consequences of threatening genocide." As the Prometheus closed on the flagship, its advanced electronic warfare systems overwhelmed the Korak defenses. Precision strikes disabled weapons and engines without compromising life support or artificial gravity. "Boarding teams ready, Captain," reported Sergeant Miller from the tactical station. Reed nodded grimly. "Execute." Throughout the vast Korak flagship, alarm klaxons wailed as multiple breaches were detected in the outer hull. Korak security forces rushed to defensive positions, but they were unprepared for what came through those breaches. Human Marines in powered combat armor moved with devastating efficiency through the corridors of the alien vessel. Their suits enhanced already formidable human strength and speed, while advanced targeting systems linked to their weapons allowed for precision that the Korak, accustomed to overwhelming force rather than surgical strikes, couldn't match. Leading one of the boarding teams, Sergeant Miller advanced methodically toward the bridge, her team neutralizing resistance with non-lethal force where possible. The mission parameters were clear: capture, not kill. The Korak would face justice for their actions. On the bridge of the inevitable dominance, Emperor Vra watched in disbelief as the tactical display showed his fleet being systematically dismantled by 4 human vessels. Nearly 60 ships had been disabled or destroyed, while the humans appeared to have suffered only minor damage. "How is this possible?" he demanded, turning to Admiral Kresh. "You assured me the humans would not interfere, and even if they did, they could not hope to match our numbers." Kresh's scales had paled to a sickly gray. "The reports of human military capabilities must have been understated, Emperor. Their technology exceeds our intelligence estimates by several generations." A tremendous shudder ran through the flagship as another weapons impact struck home. The lights flickered momentarily. "They've breached the hull," reported a terrified officer. "Human boarding parties have entered on multiple decks." Emperor Vra's eyes widened in genuine fear. "Boarding parties? They dare to invade the flagship of the Korak Empire?" Before Kresh could respond, the massive doors to the bridge burst inward. Human Marines poured through the opening, their weapons trained on the Korak officers. The bridge crew froze, none willing to be the first to test the humans' reflexes. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, her helmet retracting to reveal her face, a psychological tactic designed to emphasize that the humans were not faceless machines, but thinking beings, making deliberate choices. "Emperor Vra, Admiral Kresh," she announced, her translator converting her words to the harsh Korak language. "By authority of the Earth Federation, and in accordance with the Interstellar Conventions on the Prevention of Genocide. You are hereby detained pending trial for crimes against sentient life." Emperor Vra's expression contorted with rage. "This is an act of war! The Korak Empire will—" "The Korak Empire," Miller interrupted calmly, "has just lost its leadership and a significant portion of its fleet. I suggest you consider your next words carefully, as they may factor into your sentencing." As the human Marines secured the Korak leaders, similar scenes played out across the fleet. With the flagship captured and the command structure decapitated, the remaining Korak vessels found themselves in an impossible tactical situation. One by one, they powered down weapons and signaled surrender. In less than 3 hours, what had begun as a genocidal assault force had been reduced to a collection of disabled ships and surrendered crews. The Annie homeworld, which had been preparing for extinction, instead witnessed an unprecedented demonstration of human military prowess and human mercy. For despite the overwhelming victory, the humans had deliberately minimized Korak casualties, targeting systems rather than life support, disabling rather than destroying wherever possible. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Reed opened a channel to the Annie Defense Coordinator. "The Korak threat has been neutralized," he reported simply. "Emperor Vra and Admiral Kresh are in custody, along with their senior command staff. The remaining Korak vessels have surrendered or been disabled." The Annie official's feathers rippled in what Reed had learned to recognize as profound emotion. "Captain Reed, there are no words in any language to express what you have done for our people today. The Annie will remember this as long as our species exists." Reed nodded, uncomfortable with the praise. "We did what anyone would do when witnessing an impending atrocity." "No, Captain," the Annie responded. "Not anyone, only humans." As Reed ended the transmission, he turned to find Admiral Brooks on the main view screen. Her expression, a complex mixture of approval and concern. "Quite the situation you've created, Captain," she said. "The Galactic Council is in an uproar. Half their members are terrified we're about to embark on a conquest spree, and the other half are suddenly very interested in security arrangements with the Earth Federation." Reed straightened. "I take full responsibility for my actions, Admiral. If there are to be consequences—" Brooks held up a hand. "The consequences, Captain, are that you're now a diplomatic problem as much as a military asset. General Hayes is already in communication with the Council, assuring them we have no expansionist intentions." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "The fact that we just prevented a genocide rather than committed one is working in our favor." "And the Korak leadership?" Reed asked. "Will face trial under interstellar law. The evidence of their planned genocide is overwhelming." Brooks' expression grew serious again. "But our immediate concern is preventing power vacuums in Korak territory. Their empire spans 12 systems, all of which are now effectively leaderless." Reed understood the implications immediately. Chaos in those systems could lead to humanitarian disasters potentially worse than what they had just prevented. "What are our orders?" Stabilization operations," Brooks replied. "The Prometheus will remain here as a visible guarantee of the Ani's safety. The Valkyrie-class vessels will deploy to key Korak worlds to prevent factional fighting and protect civilian populations. Meanwhile, Earth diplomats are already en route to begin negotiations for transitional governments." Reed nodded. "It would be a complex operation, requiring both military precision and diplomatic finesse. But after stopping an impending genocide, managing the peace seemed like a manageable challenge." "There's one more thing, Captain," Brooks added, her tone softening slightly. "What you did today, acting without orders, risking your ship and crew on what most would consider a suicide mission, would normally result in a court-martial." Reed met her gaze steadily. "I understand, Admiral. Instead, you'll be receiving the Federation's highest honor for valor. The President himself has authorized it." Brooks actually smiled now. Sometimes, Captain Reed, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, especially when 17 billion lives hang in the balance. As the Admiral's image faded from the screen, Reed looked around at his crew. They had followed him into what should have been certain death, trusting his judgment and sharing his conviction that they could not stand by while billions faced extinction. "Commander Stone," he said quietly, "inform the crew they have my deepest gratitude and respect. Then set course for the Annie homeworld. I believe we've been invited to a rather large thank you celebration." Stone nodded, her usual professional demeanor briefly giving way to a genuine smile. "With pleasure, Captain." The Prometheus turned gracefully, moving toward the Ani homeworld as the disabled Korak ships were secured by teams from the Earth vessels. What had begun as a desperate last stand had become a turning point in galactic politics. The day the galaxy was reminded that while humans might be dangerous, they were dangerous primarily to those who threatened the innocent. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of the Battle of Annie Space, as it came to be known, spread throughout the galaxy. The Korak Empire, which had been built on military might and the fear it inspired, began to fracture as subject worlds saw an opportunity for independence. Earth Federation peacekeeping forces were deployed to prevent humanitarian crises, but with a clear mandate: protect civilian populations, facilitate democratic transitions, and withdraw once stability was achieved. Emperor Vra and Admiral Kresh, along with the senior Korak command staff, were tried before an interstellar tribunal. The evidence of their planned genocide, including detailed bombardment plans for the Ani colonies, was overwhelming. The sentences were severe: permanent imprisonment in a maximum security facility on a remote asteroid, with no possibility of release. Perhaps most significantly, the Galactic Council's perception of humanity began to shift. The humans had demonstrated not only overwhelming military superiority, but also remarkable restraint. They had the power to conquer, yet chose instead to protect and then withdraw. The classification of humans as dangerous Deathworlders remained, but now carried a new connotation, not of mindless savagery, but of formidable capability tempered by moral purpose. 6 months after the battle, Captain Reed stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the first human military officer ever invited to address the Assembly. The vast chamber, filled with representatives of hundreds of species, fell silent as he approached the central podium. "Distinguished representatives," Reed began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "I stand before you not as a conqueror, not as a threat, but as a neighbor. For too long, the Earth Federation and the Galactic Council have maintained a policy of mutual isolation based on fear and misunderstanding." He paused, looking around at the alien faces, some humanoid, others wildly different in form, yet all sharing the capacity for reason and emotion that defined sentient life. Humans evolved on a world that demanded strength, endurance, and the willingness to fight for survival. These traits have made us formidable. Yes, but they have also instilled in us a deep appreciation for the value of life and the importance of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Ambassador Talon, now elevated to the Annie's representative on the Council's inner circle, nodded in approval, his once bedraggled feathers now gleaming with health and pride. "The Earth Federation does not seek expansion, conquest, or dominance," Reed continued. "But neither will we stand idle when genocide threatens, when tyrants believe they can exterminate entire species with impunity. This is the promise I bring you today, a hand extended in friendship, backed by the resolve to defend the fundamental rights of all sentient beings." The council chamber remained silent for a long moment after Reed finished speaking. Then, one by one, representatives began to signal their approval, some by applauding in the human fashion, others through species-specific gestures of respect. High Counselor Vex, their environmental suit pulsing with a deep purple light that indicated profound satisfaction, floated forward. Captain Reed, the Galactic Council acknowledges the debt owed to you and the Earth Federation. A monument will be erected in the Hall of Remembrance, bearing the words, "When evil threatened, humanity restored justice." Reed inclined his head in acknowledgement. Though privately, he found the monument unnecessary. The real monument, in his view, was the continued existence of the Ani people and the peaceful transition to democratic governance in former Korak territory. As the formal ceremony concluded, Reed found himself approached by Ambassador Talon. "Captain," the Ani said, his translator conveying genuine warmth. "My people have composed songs about the day the Prometheus appeared in our skies. Children will study your actions for generations to come." Reed smiled slightly, still uncomfortable with being cast as a hero. "We did what was right, Ambassador. Nothing more." "And that," Talon replied, "is precisely what makes humans so remarkable. To you, risking everything to save strangers was simply doing what was right. The galaxy has much to learn from such thinking." Later that day, as Reed prepared to return to the Prometheus for their next assignment, he received an urgent communication from Admiral Brooks. "Captain," she said without preamble when the connection was established, "we've received a distress signal from the Orion cluster. A previously unknown species reports they're under attack by a hostile force. Multiple civilian habitats already destroyed." Reed felt a familiar tension return to his shoulders. The Orion cluster was far from Earth space, beyond even the former Korak territories. Responding would mean another journey into the unknown, another risk. "The Council has forwarded the signal to us specifically," Brooks continued. "It seems your speech made quite an impression." Reed thought for only a moment before responding. "The Prometheus stands ready, Admiral. Send us the coordinates." As the connection ended, Reed gazed out at the stars, visible through the viewport of his temporary quarters. Somewhere out there, another innocent species faced destruction. Another tyrant believed they could commit atrocities without consequence. They would soon learn otherwise. Because if the Battle of Ani-Space had taught the galaxy anything, it was this: when innocents cry out for help, humanity answers. And when humanity fights for the defenseless, even the mightiest aggressors learn to fear the Deathworlders who bring not destruction, but justice. The Prometheus departed the next morning, its engines flaring brightly as it accelerated toward the jump point. Those watching from the Council station might have noticed that the ship bore a new insignia alongside the Earth Federation emblem, a simple design showing a hand extended in aid against a backdrop of stars. Below it, in the ancient human language of Latin, were inscribed the words that had become the unofficial motto of Earth's new role in galactic affairs. Protector Innocentium, Defensor Justitiae, Protector of the Innocent, Defender of Justice. The cycle had begun anew.